Hello friends. I felt compelled to make this video because I just watched Rick Beato's new video about a new documentary called Yacht Rock. And I haven't seen this documentary, but I have seen the old YouTube series that's been around for 10 or 15 years called Yacht Rock. And it's like a 10-piece, 5 minutes each, funny little skit, cringy skit thing about the history of yacht rock. And I don't think they meant to take it so serious. It was a couple of guys named J.D. Risner and Steve Huey, and apparently they're in this new documentary. Rick Beato talks about them a little bit, and I was just a little tickled about how angry and offended old Beato got in this video. It reminds me of the Simpsons meme where it's the kids that are wrong. And that's what a lot of videos on his channel end up being. He just is just old man yelling at clouds. Another Simpsons meme. The one thing I gotta say to Rick Beato is get over yourself, man. I mean, sometimes he just comes across, he's just too smart for his own good. He does these videos once or twice a year. He tortures himself by listening to the top 10 songs that are out there. And he's just so woefully out of touch with new music that he just sets down and he figures them out instantly. So obviously it's bad, because if he can figure it out instantly, well, he's got a great ear. He's got great relative pitch. And he just talks down on the quality of new music and calls it low information. And a lot of new music is low information, but the songs are short. There's no bridges anymore. There's no key changes anymore. And all of this adds up in Rick Beato's mind that music is worse now than it used to be. And what he fails to realize is that that's what pop music has always sounded like. I mean, whether you're using simple 3-chord songs, 3 chords, or complex jazz chords, that is not the quality of the music. The quality of a song is in the hooks. The hooks and the lyrics are everything. And that's coming from a guy that doesn't care about lyrics. I don't pay attention to lyrics, but I pay attention to hooks. And you sing a beautiful hook, and I mean beautiful in an objective way, not just pretty as in beautiful. Beautiful can mean aggressive or angular or off-putting. I mean, that's still beautiful in its own way. But you can put whatever background on that melody that you want. You can make it a 3-chord thing. You can make it an acoustic thing. You can make it all electronic. That has no bearing on the quality of that song. Maybe a little bearing. I'm not sure. Whatever. That's another question for down the road. But this is how pop music has always been. I mean, he compares apples to oranges. Like, I've been doing these year ending in 4 videos, and you look at something like 1994, and the same year you have Dream Theater doing some of the most complex music of all time. The #1 song of the year was The Sign by Ace of Base. And nobody can say that one or the other of those is better or worse. They're both great in their own way. You do 1974, what I've done recently. And for every Jethro Tull or Blue Oyster Cult or UFO or King Crimson or Frank Zappa, the #2 song of the year that year was You Have Joy, You Have Fun, You Have Seasons in the Sun. And the #1 song that year was The Way We Were by Barbra Streisand. So, apples to oranges, man. Apples to oranges. Anyway, let's talk about the yacht rock thing. It is a retroactive term, just like hair metal. Modern audiences always try to recontextualize music and genres and things. And the term itself, yacht rock, is meant to be a little snarky and it's a little mean, but it's a little funny too, because we'll get into that here in a minute. Perception is everything. We're talking about the retrospective look at something older. Think of somebody like Jimi Hendrix. Just in my lifetime, he's had many ups and downs of being accepted. Like in the 80s, when everything was shred guitar and perfection and technically proficiency, everybody kind of shit on Jimi Hendrix. And I was kind of dumbfounded about that at the time in my teens and 20s. That, what do you mean? What's wrong with Jimi Hendrix? And they thought it was awful and he played out of tune and it was just, but by the time grunge came along in the 90s, you had people like Mike McCready from Pearl Jam, who was a total Hendrix disciple and playing bluesy, shreddy solos, and a lot of the blues guys, Jeff Healey and later on John Mayer, and all those guys kind of flipped the script on what people thought of Jimi Hendrix, and now he's back cool again, I guess. I mean, and that's after, even in the 2000s, people didn't care either way. Hendrix was just kind of not even in the conversation. But now he's back cool again. One of my favorite bands of all time is Led Zeppelin. I grew up worshiping that music and worshiping those guys, and they just kind of not even reinvented, they kind of invented the idea of what a rock star was and how a band looked on stage when they were performing, and they were just so cool. And all of the 80s bands and 70s bands copied that. Everybody from Aerosmith to Van Halen to Motley Crue to, I mean, everybody owed a little bit of homage to Led Zeppelin. And now, retrospectively, a lot of people look at them as the band that stole all their music. Isn't that the band that stole all their songs from blues guys and folk guys? And well, yeah, kind of, but not really. I mean, I don't know. It's weird how those narratives change, and I have a hard time with trying to accept keeping up with the way people think of things. The hairband thing was the same way. I ate a lot of shit after 1989 for still liking Skid Row and Motley Crue and bands like that. I ate a lot of shit through the 90s. But if you were there, I saw Alice in Chains open up for Van Halen. I saw Soundgarden open up for Skid Row. So there wasn't a lot of that. I mean, a lot of the people that were born after the death of hair metal are over 30 years old now. So they have a different perspective on it than somebody that was there and saw all that. This whole death of hair metal thing was a total corporate plot, I guess. You call it psyop is the word that people use now. But Nobody used that term then. That hair metal was not the thing we called it. We called it glam metal or pop metal. When Motley Crue first came out, they just called it heavy metal. Glam metal was a big term, but they used metal, even though most of it wasn't metal. It was pop rock, but it was different than pop rock. And glam metal was different than glam rock, because glam rock was from the 70s. That was David Bowie and T-Rex and Sweet and Slade and all those bands. So they called it glam metal. Same way they do with prog metal. Prog metal is Queensryche and Dream Theater and Savatage and Fate's Warning. Prog rock is King Crimson and Rush and all the 70s bands that came before. The terms for music genres are stupid, but we need them because that's how we categorize things. We have to categorize things in our brains. It's just the way that it works, man. Now let's talk about the music of yacht rock itself. Every genre sounds the same to outsiders of that genre. The thing that Rick Beato, I think, is most offended by that term is that all these bands sound so different, and you just don't fit the narrative to lump them all together. And I argue that, especially retroactively, going back and listening to a lot of this stuff, I have a playlist called Yacht Rock. And when you listen to each one of those songs, you look at some of the artists in there, and some of them you would go, no, that's definitely not yacht rock. And there's a lot of bands that aren't yacht rock, but actually have yacht rock songs. Kenny Loggins, I wouldn't say is yacht rock, but he has some songs that fit into that. The Eagles have some songs that fit into that genre. Air Supply. A lot of Air Supply fits into that. Hall & Oates. All these bands are not technically yacht rock, but they fit into this umbrella. Like I said, find my yacht rock playlist down below. Should be close to the top now that this subject is popping up, because I've edited that playlist a little bit. But let's see. Let's talk about some of the characteristics of what we call yacht rock. And I'll kind of prove it a little bit. One adjective that a lot of people use is smooth. It's smooth. It's not always soft rock. That's one point that Rick Beato made. That it's like, listen to that Toto, listen to that guitar. Steve Lukather's an amazing guitar player, and listen to how amazing that guitar is. Yeah, it's heavy guitar. If you were in the room with him playing that, it would sound like heavy metal guitar. But the way it's produced and the way it's compressed, even though it's heavy guitar, it's smooth. It's still, it's overly processed and overly produced and smooth, breezy. A lot of it is sort of an R&B or jazz-based stuff. That's why a lot of the Steely Dan stuff has a lot of real sophisticated chords and a lot of jazzy playing. A lot of electric piano. The Steely Dan stuff and a lot of Billy Joel stuff has that electric piano sound. And big reverby background vocals and harmony vocals. Think of songs like Baby Come Back, ba, 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 ba. I wanna kiss you all over, baby. The 10cc song, I'm Not in Love. That was the wrong key for that completely. I love that song. Such a good song. And the basis of that song is all those big vocals. There's a video on YouTube. You can find the story of how they recorded that song in it. And they literally recorded 100 voices on a bunch of different tracks, different notes on different tracks. And they played the mixing board as an instrument with all those oohs and ahs in the background. And that's what gives it that sound. But in hindsight, it is a cornerstone of yacht rock. The reigning king of yacht rock would be Michael McDonald. And by his association as the Steely, he did a lot of stuff with Steely Dan, but by his association with the Doobie Brothers, kind of brings the Doobie Brothers into a lot of that sound. And once again, there's a lot of crazy guitar stuff in some of that Doobie Brothers stuff, but it's so produced and compressed that that doesn't come through. You got Old Black Water and songs like that. It's just nice, which blows me away that, as a side note, that Ted Templeman is the one that produced that early Doobie Brothers stuff. And it's the same guy that produced the early Van Halen stuff, which is everything antithesis to yacht rock. The thing about Michael McDonald is he's an amazing singer and an amazing musician, but it's just incredibly lame. I mean, why do you think when Van Halen and Ted Templeman brought him in to help out on the song I'll Wait, that they kept that quiet? Why do you think Dr. Dre used the song I Keep Forgetting in his song? It's because it was lame. That's the whole joke, is that they made an old lame white guy song cool. So the term yacht rock, it's a funny narrative, and like I said, I'm completely tickled that Rick Beato was offended by it, but it's weird how it all came together. Not only the music and the way all the music sounds that comes together, it's literally in the image and the lyrics of the music too. George Benson has a song called Breezy. How about Seals and Crofts, Summer Breeze? It just makes you think of being on the beach or being on an island somewhere. Thunder Island, Islands in the Stream. Christopher Cross, another one of the Mount Rushmore of yacht rock, his biggest song is called Sailing. They had a Little River Band, had Cool Change, which is all about sailing. Even bands that are not really in the yacht rock thing, when they did a song that sounds yacht rock, and they're about going on a ship or going on a boat. Looking Glass's Brandy is about a sailor going out to sea and he's going to miss his woman. The Commodores, I wouldn't think of anything to do with yacht rock, but they have a song called Sail On, and it's on every yacht rock playlist. Billy Ocean's Caribbean Queen. Crosby, Stills, and Nash have the song Southern Cross, which is a phenomenal song, but it's about being on a boat, and it sounds like yacht rock. Pablo Cruz even had a logo that was like sunset colors, and it has a sailboat on their logo. The Captain in Tennille, the captain literally wears a sailing hat, a captain's hat. So don't tell me there's not a collective narrative that draws all this stuff together under the label of yacht rock. And I'm not going to argue that there wasn't phenomenal musicians on a lot of this stuff. When Steely Dan became more of a studio band and it was just the two of them, Walter Fagan and Donald Becker. Brecker's a guitar player. Michael Becker. That's all right. They would bring in amazing jazz players like Chuck Rainey and Bernard Purdie that Rick Beato falls over himself that he's interviewed on his channel, which is great. I'm glad he's interviewing all of these amazing jazz musicians. But you're not going to tell me that it's not pretentious, boring music. No matter how phenomenal it is, he just comes off as a snob. I mean, Toto is made up of the best session musicians from that time period. They played on thousands of records. They played on literally thousands of records. They're basically the backup band on Michael Jackson's Thriller, the biggest album of all time. And they're phenomenal musicians. But that's their job, was to make the best, most easily palatable music possible. It's just too perfect. I mean, Rick Beato does the whole thing in his video about the guitar solos and the Christopher Cross solo and Steve Lukather solo. And there's some amazing solos on a lot of that Steely Dan stuff too. But nobody cares about Virtuosity. Just nobody cares about how good the musicians are. I don't know what people want anymore. They just want something that they can hum along to while they're in their car. It's just NPC music. I've seen it called coworker music, and people just don't care about the complexity of music. You're just being a music snob. And I know, because I can be a music snob sometimes, but I love a lot of yacht rock. There's just nothing dangerous about it. It's not edgy in any way. It's not offensive in any way. It's just nice. It's good for background music. If you're having a meeting and you want to have the radio on low, put on some yacht rock and it's going to be fine. If you have a dentist office, you can put on a yacht rock station and you're not going to offend anybody. But art should challenge you. Art should rile you up a little bit. You should get an emotional response. If that's what you're trying to get out of music, it doesn't matter how technically proficient the musicians are. Music as art should elicit an emotional response. And that has no bearing on how technically proficient the musicians are. You could be the greatest musicians technically in the world, or you could be a guy that just picked up a guitar a month ago and is banging out of tune bar chords. What I want out of music is for it to make me turn my head and go, what is that? I'm more offended by boring music than I am by bad music. Anyway, I hope I was able to make all my points concisely here. I just kind of went crazy after seeing that Rick Beato video, and I just had to get this out there. Tell me in the comments below what yacht rock music you like, if you agree with me or disagree with me. I don't know. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I'll see you on the next one.